live and we're recording, so we're set.
Okay, well, greetings.
Greetings.
Welcome. My name's Chad the Alcoholic, and apparently these dweebs wanted me to do some moderating because, but I don't even know what even a moderator is, so I'm not moderating about anything.
Here's the thing: you just have to keep me from being such an asshole to Luke. That's it.
Okay.
That's your only job. Can you handle it?
Yeah. So that shouldn't be too hard. I mean, just think of him as if he might be spiritually sick. You know.
I don't think that's a leap for Charlie.
No.
That's a tool that was given to me that is like, it's like, but it's so hard to do because if you, like, I've had this happen to me where I've had a close friend, a guy that I'm close with. I was talking with him about how I do sponsorship, and he had a question about that, and it was a legitimate question, and I really took offense to it, man, because like the second that he brought that up, I like immediately thought, well, I'm just a piece of shit, like, and I've been doing this wrong forever, and what the hell, and basically nihilism comes rushing in and like making, and then I get defensive, and so that's my experience with being very sensitive about stuff like this. Like, and Peterson is right. You start poking people in the axioms. I mean, they don't like it. So my sponsor often says stuff like, he says, what if they're spiritually sick? Could it possibly be that maybe perhaps they are? And then he would say, treat them as if they are, and that they're give them the same patience, tolerance, and grace that you would cheerfully grant a sick person. And then, try that. And I'm like, because it's so hard to do that, in the moment. And I've seen that happen, I think, kind of over the last, month and a half with you guys. And I mean, it's not that serious. I don't think it's that serious.
Well,
so yeah, go, Charlie.
You might not think it's as serious as it is, Chad, but to me, it most definitely is. And I'll lay out why. It's not that what you're saying is wrong, Luke. It's not. I don't think you're wrong about what you're seeing, because I see a lot of it too. Now, the places I see it coming out of are so distant from the community that I'm involved in that I get to see it in like a third person. I don't see it affecting my community the same way it does these other ones, but you're not wrong. Here's my point though. When you say what you said on that video, it is, and I laid this out before, for all intents and purposes, you are the face of the Randos United channel. You have the most content on that channel. So when I look at the breakdown in subscribers, there's 500 and some odd subscribers. Not all those people are people from our Bridges of Meaning Discord server. Some of those people are from outside the server, and they don't know Luke the way people on the server know Luke. So they hear that and it's like, whoa, well, here's this guy I've been listening to on this channel for however long now, and he says these pretty incendiary things against Protestants. What am I supposed to make of that? And so when I hear that, I'm like, that's harmful, right? This isn't reaching the goal that you want to reach. Because I can see a goal that you want to reach. And it's like, there is some bad theology. There's bad propositions out there. There's people that deconvert or deconstruct because of this bad theology. And they do it in droves. I'm more worried about the dones than the nuns, the people that have never been in somewhere, but the people that are just done with it because they've been hurt so bad by certain other traditions. And so when I see that, I'm like, okay, how do we get those people back? right?
The Duns?
The Duns, yeah. How do we reach back out to those people?
Yeah. Well, so the specifics of that question, I don't necessarily know. I mean, I would give my general answer to everything, which is I think try to be honest. Because one of the things Chad and I talked about before today, and it wasn't related to this conversation, but Chad said he had been, one of the things that popped into his mind was let your yes be yes and your no be no. And I think what I had said, to me, what that verse means is it's essentially like take it into modern language. It would just be like, tell the truth or at least don't lie, like don't use your language to be manipulative or conniving. Just try to be as I don't know, not necessarily precise in your speech. I have problems with that, but my answer to like how do you reach the Duns is to be honest, because really ultimately at the end of the day, I think people that deconstruct and leave faith, or who would profess to be done with religion, I think at the end of the day it's personal more so than it's merely theological. I think a lot of those people are hurt because they've been throughout their religious experience, they've had people that were disingenuous, and it's a little bit like it's not even I often say, like, if you, just to round out what I'm trying to say is, one of my pet peeves is when people say, if you ever find the perfect church, just like don't go to it because then it won't be perfect. Or like, they just say like the church is full of sinners. Well, of course it is. Of course, everyone is a sinner in every church and in every religious organization you're in. Of course they are. But there's a big difference between saying everyone is a sinner and a church being dysfunctional or healthy. So like you can be a family, of course, everybody in a family is sinners, but there are some families that are healthy. And there are some that are very dysfunctional and have abusive and unhealthy relationships. And so I don't like that. I don't like when people say that, because it's like it broad brushes the whole thing to just be like everybody's sinners, so it's all just dysfunction. No, like everybody's sinners, granted, but like there's a healthy way to be and there's a dysfunctional way to be. And I think a lot of the people that end up deconstructing, it's because of dysfunction and broken relationships. And so I think the answer to that is to just try to be honest and authentic, which really gets into one of the reasons I want to have this conversation with you, is because I'm not saying I'm perfect at doing this, but really whenever I have an online conversation or randos, or whenever I'm talking to anyone for that matter, I am an external processor. So it's like, that's something good to know. Even with conversations with my wife, sometimes I'll say stuff and then later she'll be like, but you said this. And I'm just like, well, yeah, but I'm thinking out loud. Like, I'm not just like giving you just like absolute things that I've meditated on for 10 years and I'm absolutely resolute on and unbending on. Like, I'm processing out loud. And so anytime that I speak, and I'm trying as much as I can to be authentic. Like, I'm not trying to be manipulative with my language. Like, I'm riffing a lot. But the last thing I'll say is, like, this came up when we were talking earlier about whether or not to record this, or whether or not we should put up on randos, or whether or not it should be live. Someone on the Discord was saying, well, it's maybe good to have it private, because then you're not like thinking, how's this going to be perceived by people who are watching? I'm never thinking about that, ever. Like, I don't think about that, because I'm always just trying. I would say the same thing. This is what's weird about me. Like, meeting someone on the street, a random like homeless person on the street, or something that I bumped into, or somebody that I'd known for 10 years, I would interact with them in like really similar ways. Like it probably wouldn't be much different. There wouldn't be the same context of relationship, but like I'm about as transparent and intimate with a complete stranger as I would be with my wife, you know. The only reason I don't is because of out of empathy. Like if I think that's going to weird somebody out, then I don't go there. But like I'm not putting a lot of, and maybe that's helpful for this whole conversation for you to know, is like I'm not, so like even in this whole disagreement of what you think I'm critiquing, it's not that I haven't put a lot of thought and contemplation into it, but I don't have the language really dialed in, and I'm not by nature a precision thinker. Like I'm very much forest versus the trees. So when people are just like, what are the specific trees? I'm just like, I don't know. I don't care. Like I'm talking about the forest. So geez, I don't know. I feel like I went off the rails there. I don't know if any of that helps.
Okay, but here's the problem with doing that on YouTube, right? You're giving me you're up in the airplane. This is your 30,000 foot view,
Yeah.
right? And your 30,000 foot view is this is a massive problem. It's like, okay, great. You specified the problem. Now what the hell? Like where, yes, this is a problem, but where is it cropping up? Because if we actually want to affect a change, if we want to be the hands and feet of Christ and change this and bring about the kingdom of God, we have to be able to say, this is some specific places where the problems are, right? And
Yeah.
and I will totally admit I was not going to listen to the rise and fall of Mars Hill because I'm like, this is a mega church thing, this, and this guy went through the SBC for a little while and he tried to get church planners ignited in the SBC. And then it was like, well, no, we got some problems with this guy. So let's distance ourselves from him. Right. And so I was like, okay, well, that came and went. But then I did. And I'm like, in the beginning of Mars Hill, this guy had a vision and he used the correct language. And whether his heart was truly in that language that he was using or not, I can't say for sure.
Right.
But in the beginning, that was right. And then it went off the rails. And now look, now you have people that left that place that have no more church affiliation because it was tied up not only in the person, but the theology that that person was putting forward. So even if it shifted, they still had to follow the person if they didn't agree with the theology. And it's like, these things like this are harmful, right? And he went through his phase of reform theology and then he was back on this side and like the whole process, it's like that's harmful. Like we can point to that as a data point and say, okay, that was harmful. How did that go wrong? And then let's make sure that we try not to let that happen again. Right? I want to get data points like this went wrong at specific places so I can say, okay, let's try to avoid those pitfalls next time. Because I think that's how you reunify the church, right? You're not going to get everybody into Eastern Orthodox churches. There's too many Protestants that just disagree with more than one thing from there. But
I don't even think that'd work anyhow.
But you can get them unified in a message that we put forth to the rest of the world, to the nuns. And in that unified message, what is it going to be? Because we have to be able to avoid the pitfalls in order to get that unified message out. So it's like, okay, where are the pitfalls? I want to start marking them. And that's where I say I want to work with you because I don't want to see this continue to happen. I don't want to hear more stories like Mars Hill come out. I would rather that if we can pinpoint them and avoid them, that we do that. And then leave the rest, like the disagreements between Protestants and Eastern Orthodox and Catholics, like leave those alone. Like if we have a unified message, then other people are going to go, oh, okay, I kind of agree with that more. So I'm going to go off in that direction. But the message, the unifying message stays the same throughout. It doesn't matter which tradition you're going to. That's what I would like to eventually get to someday. That's where I see unity actually happening.
So right, what you're saying, I feel like Chad has something to say, but my one response to that would be is the unity that's behind the different denominations. Because, and to use Mars Hill as an example, let's just say like when he's in his, I don't know, people aren't paying as much attention to Driscoll now, but let's say when he was in his unhealthiest at the Mars Hill in Seattle was during this reform phase, because when it started he wasn't like so hardcore reformed, and then he became reformed, and then you could really easily map that onto just like, so this is to your point, I think you could really easily map that onto, well, this is like the problem is then reformed theology, because that's the data point, right? When he was most unhealthy is like when he was hardcore reformed, and like when this is when all this damage happened. But then you have this other data point over here called Paul Vanderklay, who's reformed, who isn't super unhealthy, and creating just, trails of disaster behind him, and has no desire for status. I mean, Paul very often sets things up where he doesn't want status. He doesn't try to talk to status people. He doesn't try to talk to authors. He talks to randos. And he's not trying to, all the stuff that Driscoll was doing to streamline and market and blow things up, Paul does none of that stuff. So, I mean, and so Paul's whole community is built around authenticity, listening, not correcting doctrine. Like Paul said that explicitly in one of his videos recently, where I made a comment and I was like, this is the gold, Paul, that I think you should really dig into, because this is what you do. Because he was saying when he talks to randos, he's just listening to them, because he said he learned a long time ago, he's not going to correct like points of theology that they make, because he said what happens when they do that, people just shut down and they just tell you what you want to hear. So essentially, when you correct people's theology, they just shut down. They don't tell you what they really think. They just give you the Sunday school answer, which may or may not be what they really believe. And so Paul has created this community of people that have created, I think, a legitimate sense of community around what I would call conversational and intellectual hospitality, where we're not being so border policing and theology policing about what people think. I'm not trying to be. What I'm trying to do, to your point, is, and I've said this many times, I don't think the answer, and this is the Cormac McCarthy quote that I love to send out all the time, I don't think the answer is for everybody to become Orthodox. I think that's a really ignorant view of human beings and how they operate. Like that's not going to work. It's not going to work. What makes you, like, for example, what makes you Baptist, even to a large extent, what makes me broadly Protestant and probably really Baptist, is so deep that if I just think, oh, I identify in my head with all of these ideas of Orthodox theology, that's so much different than someone who was born and raised as a cradle Orthodox. It's just a world of difference. And so like, that's not the answer. The answer is to find the unity that's behind all of these different traditions, which I think Paul models really well. And so like, we have to, part of what I would say my goal is to get at I think we need to properly diagnose the disease before you can treat it. And it's not necessarily particular points of doctrine. I think it's the spirit of how we hold the doctrine behind it. That's a lot more at play, I guess. I don't know.
Right. And so I would say the data point for Mars Hill isn't actually the Reformed theology. It's the person,
Right.
Mark Driscoll, right? That's the data point. Why did he become the person that he became that everybody followed him, right? Why did he fall in this trap of, I need to feel like I'm the archetype of Jesus right now standing in front of you. I am the risen Christ in front. Like, where did that mentality in him come from? And like, that's what we need to try to avoid. It's not the fact that it was a mega church. It's not the fact that it was multi-campus. It's not the Reformed theology. Like, it's none of that. It's, you listen to him from like 2001 to say 2005, really on track. 2005 on up, you can see he starts going downhill, right? And it wasn't because of the Reformed theology. It's because something in him shifted. And what was that? Right. So it's a good study case and a data point.
So do you think though, I've heard this said many times about like money or power. Money or power don't, like they're somewhat neutral. They don't do anything. They just magnify, they just amplify what's already there.
Right. Because
So
you
like
can,
with Driscoll, I don't think he changed as much as his circumstance amplified what was already there a little bit. And so
right. And so then we have to say, okay, like, how could we have known that this, like, were there markers beforehand? Right. Because you take someone like Tony Evans, he's been doing this for 40 years. Greatest Southern Baptist pastor, in my opinion, that will ever exist. He has a mega church. He has resources beyond what you can imagine at his disposal. And yet, when you hear him speak, he speaks like he's talking to 25 people sitting in pews in front of him. Like nothing about him changes. He could give that same sermon to 5 people. And it's not about the church. It's not about the money. It's not about any of that for him. He's been doing it like that's just who he is. So it's like,
Where is he
okay,
located?
he's in Oak Cliff, Texas, which is really close to it's a suburb of Dallas. So you take
What's the
him,
historical, like, I'm wondering what the kind of historical, like the historical, what are the people like there over the last, whatever, 150 years? Are they pretty religious people?
in Texas,
and the
Dallas,
yeah,
yeah.
for sure. But you
That
take
has something to do with it, because this is what was coming up for me when you guys were both talking was what I think one of the things that's kind of being left out is the agency of the person sitting in the pew. And because like, you know, like this is I think, and also this goes to like Luke should be able to say like anything he wants as well as you should. I know I've made some really stupid stuff on that news that like some of it's regrettable, because it's like, oh man, that's kind of, I don't really want to be doing that, but I kind of did it for laughs. But part of this though too is like I have to respect people's agency, and so I can't be, for me, I don't want to be disrespectful to the people that are listening by assuming that what I say is going to make them better, right? Because kind of like, I don't know. Do you are you following what I'm saying? This is why I'm not like going to be the greatest at doing
I'm
this
still
thing.
following.
I am following what you're saying, but how does that relate to like Driscoll or Tony Evans?
Well, because like Driscoll, like, so like the people in Tony Evans era, right, or area, most of them, I'm guessing a lot of those people have been into the church for a very long time. I don't know about the history of Seattle, and what the people are like there. So what's that?
It's post-Christian. Like there's it's like Europe or the UK. There's a lot of people that have never been to church. Like when I lived out there, I met people who had like never been to a church, and they grew up that way their whole life, which was crazy for me in the Midwest, you know?
Right. And then, you know, maybe, you know, I don't know. I don't know much about the Driscoll stuff because I haven't watched any of it. A lot of it doesn't really interest me. Like the second I start smelling crap, like I'm out. I don't want anything. Like I went to a church where this is where I got baptized. I got baptized the weekend before Easter. No, 2 weeks. I got baptized the week before Palm Sunday. And I loved the church at the time because they were going through the Bible line by line. And then I was there for like the next 3 or 4 weeks, and I was going to the Bible studies, and I was noticing a little bit of like this weirdness there. And then I was in one of the things, and the guy said something about a higher power and how that isn't good. And I was gone. I was like, whatever, it's not for me. And so I left. Now, is he wrong? I don't know. the church is full. They're doing good. But for me, I was like, it's not for me, you know. And then we talked, and he called me and he said that he thought that I was being rude because I left in the middle of the sermon. And he said that he thought that AA was an error. And I'm like, that's fine. You can think that, but I'm glad you're doing what you're doing over there, but I don't want nothing to do with it. And, you know, I'm doing what I'm going to do over here. So I don't know exactly what I might be muddling our waters here a little bit, but I don't want to forget about the agency of the people who are listening. So like, I think partly what I'm trying to say is, Charlie, like whatever Luke says, he's not a puppet master, you know, and I don't think that Luke's influence on 600 people is going to be that heavy. So like, my concern from somebody who is actually in that community, it's like we're wasting a lot of time fighting over something that seems like so insignificant to me anyways. So that's all I want to say. Sorry, I'm talking too much.
No, that's okay. You're part of this conversation too. And that's why I was picking this, is because I knew that I was not going to be the only one that saw that video that was upset by it. And I wasn't. And so I'm trying to process, like, how did that help? Right? How did that help actually bring about any unity when more than one of us felt like that was divisive? And I'm like, okay, like, let's backpedal this. Let's try to figure out a better way to say it so that we're like, yeah, that's the problem and I see it. Because I want them to see the same problem that you're seeing, Luke.
Yeah,
I'm seeing it too.
No,
and some others on there are. So I'm like, I want people to see that problem, because if they see it, they can be vigilant about, okay, well, you know, I've seen this over here, and like that pretty well lines up with that. So let me sniff that out and see if that's part of this.
Yeah. So I'm all about the whole POS thing came up because it was one of my, I think I came up with it because it was just one of my spur of the moment riffs as I get on. Because I do, what's one of the reasons I love Voxer is because I get in there's certain modes where I like Voxer because I don't like text-based communication. I like Voxer because it's these audios that you can send back and forth, and then people can listen at their own convenience and then respond if they want. And it allows for it allows you to fully form whatever you're thinking as well as you can in whatever span you want to be able to form. And I was just I get into like little mini flow states of riffing because one of my things is I say often, I like to think in front of my head. Like I like to not know what I'm saying. And I like to not prepare beforehand because I feel like that allows me to like be manipulative. And I know that I'm capable of manipulating people. Like I know, like that's a skill that I think I have, and I don't want to do it. Like I hate it with a vengeance. And so I don't want to do that. And so I came up with this POS theology thing because it's really like this double entendre of I think the theology that teaches that people are by nature, you know, as Luther said, I mean, this is kind of like the riff on it, like pieces of dung that are covered over with the white snow of Christ, but like the very nature of a human being is a piece of shit. I think that theology shit. Like I think it's garbage. And I think that it bears a lot of bad fruit. And like this isn't like there's a lot of great things from Luther, but I think that theology is crap, and I don't think you can defend it philosophically, theologically, existentially, historically. Like I think it's indefensible. And so that's kind of why the name came up. It's not and part of me, like I never know the balance with language, because to some degree language that is inciting is I don't know. Sometimes that can like, this is, so I'll bring up this guy because it's part of the whole Mars Hill thing. But Douglas Wilson, he's a reform guy from Idaho, and this isn't even a popular thing to say because this is connected to the whole Mars Hill thing. Bethlehem Baptist, John Piper's old church in Minneapolis, is going through like a schism split. Part of that, like Douglas Wilson is connected to that. And Douglas Wilson, like I've said in the past, I just love-hate relationship with him, but I like him quite a bit, even though I don't approve of everything he said, kind of like Piper. And he's written articles before on how using kind of inflammatory and even like abrasive language and critiquing your opponents can be helpful. And I don't like that. Like, that's not my style necessarily. One could argue the POS thing was that, but it was like, but I'm talking about it in such a generic term. I'm not like saying, because it's this thing that I think is behind, like, I don't know, essentially some degree of it is behind like all of Western theology, because I think a lot of it goes back to Augustine. And then you can see particular instantiations of where it's the worst, like where people are very self-loathing and hate themselves, and just like the whole religion is about fear and shame and guilt, and it's not about love and reconciliation and being made in the image of God, and that God like goes after the one lost sheep and the prodigal son and all that. Like that religion creates people that hate themselves, and no matter what they tell themselves about like God theoretically loving them through Christ. Sorry, my kids are texting me. I'll silence my phone. I don't think it really works. And so like, this is the last thing I'll say. I'm going off for a while, but like the Mars Hill thing to me it's unique because Driscoll was there. My children are coming to the window. It's unique because Driscoll was there, and he was a very unique personality. But yet, like I could go, I don't know, Charlie, if you've heard some of my own personal testimony of church experiences, because it's also simultaneously not unique, because like my worst church experiences, I went to a church that was theologically identical pretty much to Driscoll's church. It was a church plant. It was a smaller church. It wasn't, the preacher didn't preach at all like Driscoll. And I mean, he wasn't saying the kinds of things Driscoll said, but like theologically, they held all the same values. And, you know, all of the division that came out of Driscoll's church came because Driscoll was just so bombastic. Yeah. It was inevitable. But like my pastor, for example, this is kind of my argument against confessionalism, which I think is part of this POS theology, is that when you set up a church based on these statements of faith and these ideas, what that does is like it brings in people who just agree in their minds with all of those ideas, which doesn't mean they necessarily believe it. It just means they think they do. Like it consciously assent to all of these things. But the problem is that anybody who doesn't consciously assent to all those things wouldn't even go to that church, because why would they ever go there? So then you end up it's systematically setting it up to be a bunch of yes men. And that's something that came up in the Driscoll thing. It's like the only people that were here were yes men, and he excluded anybody who wasn't supporting him. But that's what confessionalist churches do. And the reason I know that is like, I went to this church. So this is going to be a little longer, but like, this is kind of part of my deconversion, although I never deconverted from the faith, is like I in my adult life went to similar churches that were this young, restless, and reformed. But then as my conscious theology changed, particularly around the doctrine of hell. So like what happened is I became an annihilationist, somebody who believed in conditional immortality. So I no longer believed in eternal conscious torment. And I did that based off of biblical reasons. Like I was still very Protestant for that reason. I was just like, I can walk you through all the exegetical arguments why annihilationism. And Sam could do that too. Sam knows all this stuff. We talk about this stuff. And then I went to this church that was in the tradition that I had been in my whole adult life, because we were moving. And so I was going to a new church, but I wanted to talk to the pastor beforehand, before I moved, and just say, okay, just so you know, like, I'm no longer a traditionalist when it comes to the doctrines of hell. Like, I'm an annihilationist now. And this is a conviction that I have based off of the Bible. And this is something that I'd love to talk about in community. Like, I just don't want to hold these opinions by myself, me and my Bible. Like, I want to sort these things out together as a body. And he was all cool with that. Until I went to the church for 2 years and like wasn't changing my mind, and they didn't really want to engage with me, and they didn't really want to have the conversation. Eventually got to the point where they were just like, okay, we just need to find you a different church where everybody, where like people have more of your ideas. And I was like, I don't want to go to another church. Like, that's not what I want. I don't want to just go to a church where everybody has the same ideas. And so, and it was this, and I've probably talked about other places, but like, it was I was basically kind of like, it was like an intervention. It was like a surprise intervention where all this came upon me, and I was trying to, like, me and this other guy were having a disagreement where we couldn't really work through it. So then I invited an associate pastor, like very, very Matthew 18, like, if two of you can't agree, invite in another. And so like I invited in this guy who knew both of us, and then all of a sudden he showed up that night, and it was him and the head pastor. And then they just like both, and then they basically said, well, I won't go into all the detail, but like it was bad. And they basically like accused me of doing things that I wasn't doing, and I got very upset and like called my wife upstairs to like witness it. And like it was my worst church experience. And so I say all of that to say, like, the Mars Hill thing is specific and it was bad, but I think a big reason that it was, my point with all that is to say, like, I don't think it's unique though. I think it's much more common than even Mars Hill. And I think it would happen a lot more, but it's just that all the churches that exemplify this same spirit, they are either very traditional in that it's built on a community of people that just live together and love each other no matter what, and the ideas aren't really what they're centered around, which is maybe like the kind of church you go to.
Yep.
Or it's a group of people like in my city that is a confessionalist church that attracts everybody that have all these ideas based on their conscious assent to these doctrines. And so nobody else goes there who has a differing opinion. And if they do, they just leave. Very rarely do they stay and try to work through it in community when they have a differing opinion. So it's just bubbles and bubbles and bubbles and bubbles and bubbles. So these kinds of like pastors that would abuse people and manipulate and stuff never manifest because they never have the context to manifest.
Well, but you're being really super specific in what you're saying too, because it's like you were the type of person who was going to read those statements of faith, right?
Right.
You talk to somebody who's been Baptist their whole life and they're going to a different church, they're not reading those statements of faith. Look at this.
Right.
I shouldn't be doing this according to Baptist doctrine.
Oh.
I should not be drinking that, right?
Yeah.
Yet here I am. So what does that say about my statement of faith that I'm following, right? I think there's a whole lot of people that don't look at those. I think there's a lot of people that go community first, and then maybe one of these days I'll read those statements of faith that are built into this community that I'm in. Those, in my opinion, are healthy because I can tell you that those communities, people are, when they have a differing opinion, they're hashing it out with one another. Now, they're not doing it inside the walled garden, right? It's not taking place inside the building. It's taking place outside the building, but they're still talking through those things.
Yeah.
And so I think if we want to get really super specific and say it's in the confessions and the documents that people should read before they join, a specific tradition or church, then yeah, I'll agree there. I think they are written into it. I think they're very well baked into it. I guarantee you look at the Baptist doctrines of faith and you will find Augustinian original sin written into it. But if
Sure.
you go to a Southern Baptist church and you listen to a pastor, he's not going to tell you anything about original sin. He's going to
Sure.
say it's your sin. It's not Adam and Eve's sin. It's yours. Like he's
Sure.
not going to go back that far. And so I will agree to that point that it is. It's baked in to those standards. And that's a lot of different traditions that have those, that you look at those statements of faith or those confessions and they're all pretty well alike.
Yeah. And part of that's totally fine. So like to me, you say all that and you say, I have absolutely no problem with a ton of people in a local community going to a church, like what you were saying, they haven't read the statement of faith. They don't really take it that seriously and they're just there loving on each other. Great. Like fantastic. Perfect. I would probably prefer that because even if you read that statement of faith, like it's, most people just aren't like my dad, for example, God bless him. Like he doesn't like sometimes my mom likes theology a little bit more and I am the way that I am. And sometimes I'll get in a conversation with my mom about theology and he'll just be like, I don't have any idea anything you just said.
That's Chad right now.
That kind of guy.
And I think that's fantastic. Like that's great. Who cares? You don't have to. Wonderful. Like I don't care. My problem is more in like so there's two levels. My problem is more on like the institutional abuse of that structure, which may or may not happen. Like what we were just saying, it likely doesn't happen a lot because people just work it out on their own and it's fine. But then if it gets elevated to the point of pastors and doctrine policing and then including and excluding based off of all this stuff, I think that's where it can get really dangerous. And then also like there is some kind of what I was trying to say by like the piece of shit theology. There is like this broad feeling of which I think is pervasive. Like I think it's all over. And I think it doesn't matter what denomination you go to. It doesn't matter if you're secular or if you're an atheist, or even if you think about it in these terms, but like the idea of, there's lots of ways you can say it, of God being far off or distant, or you feeling alone in the world, disconnected from the world. That existential feeling has a theological root. That's what I'm talking about.
Okay, but what's the theological root? Like what makes a person feel that way? That's what I want to get down to, because the way I describe that is I tell people, well, if you feel like God's that far off or that you're walking in his shadow, well, then, I'm not saying it's necessarily a sin, but we got to figure out like where that disconnect is. Why are you not feeling that? Why are you not feeling the love from God? Because we all go through seasons of that.
Sure.
There's no doubt. We do. We feel that way sometimes.
Yeah.
And even though that's a lie that Satan puts in our head, like God's that far off from us, he's not paying attention to what's going on with me right now, right? That's a deception thing.
Yeah.
Because we can be deceived into thinking that, because he says he's never far off from us.
Yeah.
He's right there with us the whole time. When we're walking through the storm, he's there, right? He didn't, he was walking out on the sea when Peter walked out to him, right? Where was he? He wasn't on the other side of the shore waiting for the disciples. He was out there on the water. He's like, I'm with you. I got you through this.
Yep.
But we get deceived into thinking that he's far off when he's not.
Yeah.
And it's like, why?
But he even did that, didn't he?
Yeah.
Christ.
Oh.
Yeah. Christ was walking on the water when he called Peter out. So it's like he's there the whole time. He's never far off. And so if we're going to say there's a theology that ties to that, it's like, okay, what is it? And if you ask me, it's exactly what was going on in the Bible. Whose sin caused this man to be blind? right? Jesus flipping the script there saying, whose sin was it? Right? Like he's trying to show you something that we still haven't got for whatever reason. And where does that feeling come from?
Right.
Ugh.
So Chad, when you were saying even Jesus, what was when you said even Jesus felt that? So like, are you talking Gethsemane? Like what, or Lord, Lord, why have you forsaken me? Like, what do you, is that what you mean?
So what, I guess what was coming to mind was, first of all, how was Satan even, I hate that. I hate even using the word Satan. To me, it's just, I don't like it because I think it's almost too much of a character. Like it's too much of a cartoon. Because to me, I think this is kind of something like, I don't know. I kind of want to say two sides of the same coin, because like, but okay. So what I'm talking about here is how is it that Satan even makes his way in to talk to Jesus, right? So he's there, he's listening to him, he's hearing him, and then so it's and then later, what does it say? Why, I know there's some whatever concordant thing about the why have you forsaken me, but that's kind of like a similar feeling, like why have you left me? I mean, I think that's I don't know, sometimes I see all this stuff and I think like I can read all of the theology in the world that there ever was, and it still doesn't mean much to me until my own experience is laid up against it. And I can have an understanding of whatever this person's talking about, but it means zero until there's a revelation with it. Sure. And so to me, theology, I've said this before, I'm trying to upset people, but excuse me, I don't like the idea of theology. I know it's necessary. I mean, I guess it's probably necessary, but to me, it's kind of garbage because in general, theology, the idea, because it kind of depersonalizes, right? To me, it seems to it might be something where I'm going to reach out to a book of theology to understand God, whereas instead I can actually be spending time with Charlie and Luke to understand God, and we can discuss this stuff together. And there's a theology that really is more of like to me something that is real. So I don't care what Luther said, and I don't care what Calvin said. I don't care what you did, and like. I care what you guys say and I care what like Vanderklay says because he talks with me. Like I can ask him a question, he'll answer it, and we can work on it together. Like I've had, you know what I'm saying? So I think like to me, theology, the books about theology. Here we go. The books about theology and all this different stuff about these confessions or whatever. I don't even know what the hell that is, but whatever that is, it seems to be kind of like. It kind of like goes against the idea of let your yeses be yeses and your noes be noes.
Well, right? And that's the thing, Chad. Theology books are garbage, right? And because they only serve the publisher and the theologian who are authoring them, and that's what they serve. And so
now what you just said is exactly calling it piece of shit theology. You said it's garbage, right? So this is the thing.
No,
it's like,
no. Hey, listen, books written on theology are garbage. I've said it and I'll say it again. If theology does not point you to a person, it's garbage. It is the study of the nature of God. Where are you going to get your best theology? Biblical and church fathers. Why? Because church fathers were the closest to the sources of biblical scripture than we can be, right? So where's the best part to get your theology? Both and. Read both of them because both of those are going to point you to the person of Jesus Christ. Theology books are written to be used in seminaries or for people that are post-seminary, right? They're just for those theologians that actually want to read the books. It's like trying to read Maps of Meaning. Maps of Meaning wasn't written for the mass public, really. When Peterson wrote it, it's a very intellectual book. It's not for a, it's not really meant to be a mass consumer product, and you shouldn't think of theology books that way either.
Yeah, Maps of Meaning. That's a tough book, man. Holy crap. But like again, I mean, do you understand what I'm saying? Like even whatever the church fathers said, like, and I think the same idea kind of holds true. Like they can tell me all this different stuff, and it might not mean anything to me until like 5 years from now.
Right. But that's because, just like you said, it's both and, right? Until you've had the experience of something.
Right.
And I posted a clip about Tony Evans saying this, right? And he's like, on one side you got the people that's all theology, on the other side you got the people that's all feelings. He's like, you got to get the two together. If theology doesn't point you to the person of Jesus Christ, then it's not worth it in the beginning.
Right.
And so I agree that theological books are garbage. I don't agree that all theology is garbage, because that's to say that there's nothing to point you to the person of Jesus Christ when actually there is.
Mm-hmm.
And some of that is written word, but most of that is acted out. So it's watching other people in a congregation, watching your family, and is participating in both of those that has more emphasis on your theology than even what you read from the Bible.
So where I would chime in, and hopefully this is in sync with what you guys are saying, but like Chad, you had said a while ago that you'd rather sit here and talk to me and Charlie than read a theology book, or even read the Bible, or read the church fathers, or whatever. Not to say any of those things are bad, but it's more, to me, that's almost more like an affirmation of incarnation, because this is something I've been thinking a lot about recently, and I've been pushing. I've been writing some comments to Paul, and like, what was it? He was talking about this recently in the JP Marceau Vervaeke conversation, but because they were talking about narrative and things, and I talked to you a little bit about this, but like, there's a difference between the narrative and the story is what is. And even with the Bible, like, a narrative is dead. It's an abstraction. Like, it has no being. It need for a narrative to become what it's meant to be, it has to be embodied, and then it becomes the story, like reality. It has being, then it has a body, it has action. The Bible is the same way. Like, the Bible as the word of God, I mean, and that's kind of like, the word of God, the logos of God, is a person, right? To your point, it's not just like this book. This book is the scriptures. I like to refer to it as the scriptures more so, because the word of God is a person. But in order for it to have being, like, it has to be manifested in the church. It has to be lived. And so, like, when we're sitting here talking, there's something about, in as much as we are doing it authentically and in unity and in love and in the Holy Spirit, there's life here, because we're alive. We are persons. A theology book, me and a theology book, is just, there's no relationality to it. Like what you were saying with Luther, like, you can't talk to Luther, you can't talk to Calvin, you can't talk to the church fathers. You can read stuff that they've said, but like, you can talk to us. And ultimately, Charlie, this is like where I was saying to some other people, but like, really at the end of the day, I was like, Charlie and I have to figure this out, because like, if Charlie and I can't figure this out and come to a place where like we're not fighting, and if we can't get to a place of unity, even if at the end of the day we disagree about ideas, but like, we can't be in communion with each other, I was like, everything everything that I say is bullshit. Like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Like, if me and you can't come together, like if I speak in the tongues of men and of angels but have not love, it's irrelevant. Like, at the end of the day, if everything that I've said is right and I can't love you well, disregard everything that I've said. Like,
Well, I'll tell you
who
what,
cares?
if you guys can't figure it out, how the hell is the rest of the church supposed to figure it out? Like, if we can't solve something this stupid, like, seriously, like, we can't. Do you see what I'm saying? It's a microcosm. I mean, this is like the kind of stuff that, I mean, and here's something I've seen AA meetings that people lives literally depend on, like right now, and you'll get people and they'll get into scraps about the most dumb shit, and that meeting can collapse, and there's literally and people's lives depend on it. So, like, that's why I think, like, yeah, I don't know. I just think, like, if you guys can't figure this out, and that's why I think it's what's happening. I think we're figuring it out right now, which is very nice, because, like, it's good. Like, I think it's good to figure this stuff out, even though I can't talk right now. Yeah, I think I drink too much caffeine.
Well,
Yeah.
I'll get back to what my beef was, and then maybe we can actually flesh it out. So my beef was that regardless of what we think, words matter. And so if we're going to talk about this in any way that's going to be constructive, there has to be less of the incendiary language. And because I didn't feel like that was manifest in the spirit of love. I felt like that was at least two people in that conversation were post this theology, and it went off in this weird rant tangent about this theology. And it's like, okay, but, like, because I want to glean something from it. I know that's very selfish, but if I'm going to watch the randos you videos, I want to be able to glean something from that. I want to say, aha, I got a moment. And I don't feel that way towards, like, I can talk with Sherry and we can, for the most part, be fine. Unless I'm punching at you, then we're not okay. And I can talk to Dave. Me and Dave get along just fine. Andrew L., he's cradle Catholic. He's probably going to be Catholic for the rest of his life. We can have great conversations, get along with him just fine. Father Eric Big Mac, I know where he stands. He's like,
Yeah.
dude, you're a Protestant. You can't have communion with us, but I love you and I think you're a great guy. I can talk with all these people and not have those feelings. So I'm like, why is the common denominator Luke? And then it's like, you said what you said, and it just, I'm like, there's no unity to be had here. I felt like after that video, for me personally, I felt like I can't talk to Luke anymore unless it's a fight. I can't talk to him, because for me, that just blew the floodgates open, and it's like, Protestants, piece of shit theology, end of story. And I'm like, but dang, like, come on, there's got to be some wiggle room in here.
Well, what if it was just somebody like, what if it was somebody who had a bigger platform than Luke, and they were atheist,
Wouldn't
or
care.
they were whatever,
Wouldn't
and they
care.
were talking, right? But so that's what I mean. Like, why does it?
I wouldn't care because they're not trying to help solve the problem. If
Oh, but they're
somebody is
trying
in
to help
front
solve
of
a different problem.
if somebody is in front of me and they're trying to help solve a major problem that I see, which is people deconstructing and leaving the faith, that's a massive problem to me. Like huge. Because I'm like, I want them to not be so heavenly minded that they're no earthly good. I want them to have the love of Christ now, in the here and now, and feel that. And so when Luke says things like people are deconstructing from the church, I'm sitting up, I'm paying attention, right? He has more of my salience than Paul Vanderklay does. And that says a lot because I'm only,
Hell
I
yeah,
like being
Paul,
paid.
take that.
He has more of my salience because Paul is like, yeah, but, and then he goes right back into like his little niche and the Christian Reformed Church. He talks a lot about that, and that's good. I'm glad that he does because you can't get Paul out of his little, like, this is the Christian Reformed Church. This is my tradition.
Here's a little
Right.
idea for a title. Luke is more interesting than Paul Vanderklay.
Sure, we can do that.
Just think about it.
But he has more of my salience because he's like, I see it as a problem. And he's not saying it's just a before I didn't feel like he was saying it's just a problem over here with these people. Then after that, I felt like he's saying, okay, yeah, it's a problem, but it's just these people who are having the problem. And I'm like, I see the problem too. Like, let's work on
Right.
it together.
So here's the thing, Charlie. It's not a. So it's I don't know. It's simple, but it's complicated because. So even in people that are deconstructing, and I've said this before, sometimes I think the most faithful Christians in certain contexts are people who've deconstructed and become atheists. Because sometimes in certain theological traditions, if you see this stuff that you've been presented with and you have a certain temperament where you are not a loyalist kind of yes man, just go with the flow, I'm not reading the statements of faith. But if you're the kind of person who's reading the statements of faith, who's taking this seriously, who wants to think about things, who maybe has a low enough politeness to speak up when you disagree about stuff, who's really thinking about these things, who's high in openness, and you are raised in a certain theological tradition that's so narrow that says just like this very narrow, limited thing is Christianity, and anything outside of it isn't Christianity. And then who also says, and God and you intrinsically are a piece of shit that is opposed to God, and God is going to punish you in hell forever for finite sins. He's going to punish you infinitely for finite sins. For someone with all of that to reject that and say, I'd rather be an atheist, I call that faithfulness. And so to me, that's not even, I'm not, and this is where I try to emphasize to you, like this is where I'll just quote again, because I quote it all the time. This Michael Polanyi quote is that doubt and belief are ultimately equivalent. Doubt relies on a subterranean set of tacit belief in something else. So what Michael Polanyi is saying is doubt and belief are the same thing. What doubt is belief in something that you can't articulate. Doubt is saying, okay, this thing that I can articulate, I don't believe. I believe something else. I don't know what it is, but it ain't that. That's belief. It's just belief in something you don't know what it is. But I'm a Christian mystic, for the love of God. Like, so when an atheist rejects something that I think isn't Christian in the name of Christianity, that is a Christian move. So if I think an atheist can be a Christian, you don't think I think a Protestant can be a Christian? Like, what are we talking about? Of course I do. Of course I do. I just don't agree with some of these broad tenets of and history of theological development that I think has brought about the state of being as a collective consciousness that we are right now. And that's what I'm trying to talk about. I'm not talking about individuals. I'm not even talking about groups. I'm not talking about denominations or churches. I'm talking about like principalities and powers. So of course, I think you as a Protestant and me, some of my best friends in the Discord are Protestants. I mean, one of my oldest one, Jeff, he's a Protestant. He has zero interest in converting to Orthodoxy. I couldn't care less. I don't care. Jess is a Protestant. I don't care. Lance is converting to Orthodoxy. Fine, great for him. Like I honestly have told people, and I don't know if I've told you this, but I think it's true. I actually consider me converting to Orthodoxy almost a failure. I see it as a temperamental weakness in me. Like, I think people should stay in the tradition they were raised in, honestly. That's what I think. If you can, by any means, I mean, it doesn't mean you have to hold all those convictions. You can be your own person. But if you can, by God's grace, stay in a tradition that you were raised in, even if you have differing opinions and love those people, to me, that's the best. That's the absolute best position to be in. I'm not some kind of evangelical for Orthodoxy. It's not what I'm doing.
Can you see how it came off that way though? Because a lot of that video was about Eastern traditions and how the West was failing. And I'm like, okay, yeah,
I do
we
think
are,
that too.
but yeah, we are. And don't get me wrong, like church membership is declining. People are the biggest part for me is people are deconstructing, like church membership declining. Okay, sure. Like, because what is it really to be a member of the church, right? Like, there are plenty of people that just show up and they go for weeks and months and years and never do the membership thing. And it's like, but they're
Right.
still a valuable part of the community.
Yeah.
So that, whatever. But the deconstruction part really gets to me. It's like, yes, the West is failing, but is the East the answer? Well, no, it's not. It's fixing our failures from the West, right? It's looking at, we need to take a hard look at why Eastern Orthodoxy is making a rise and go,
Yes.
okay, where do we actually agree with them?
Yeah.
Because there's so many points of agreement, and it's
Yes.
just the disagreements are so stupid. And it's like, why do we disagree on this?
I think the theological points of disagreements have substance. This is where I'm not like so anti-propositionalist that I think there's no substance there. But I also, like what I was saying at the same time, I don't think you're not going to take the answer. The answer isn't to take like however many people are in the Christian West, like tens of millions, like hundreds of millions, like all, and they've been in the Christian West for how long? Like 1,000+ years, and their history is rooted in the West for 1,000+ years. You think like in one generation, like they're just gonna flip and become and go Eastern? Like, that's just stupid. Like, that's just insane. That's not gonna happen. But people are much too rooted. Like, it's just what it's that Cormac McCarthy quote that I love so much is like, what forms the weathers and seasons and years that form a land are very similar to what forms a man, and they're not easily come by otherwise. Like, you're just not going to change all that overnight. It doesn't work that way. But yet we do need ecumenical dialogue to be able to figure out, because I agree with you, the deconstruction on one hand, the deconstruction I think is good because I think it's necessary. Because this is where I'll quote like Master Eckhart, who's from the West, he's Catholic, but he says like, God isn't found by addition, but by subtraction. So like, if you have a faith that's built up by a bunch of things that you've built and constructed together, like that's gotta be deconstructed, because that isn't faith. Like, faith is much simpler than that. So that kind of deconstruction is good. What makes me sad, so like part of it is necessary and inevitable, but what makes me sad is like all the stories. Like, there's just so many people that are hurt by it, and not just individuals, families, communities, churches. Like, it's just, we have to figure out a way to do, it's maybe inevitable, but we need to figure out a way to do it better. And what I'm trying to do is diagnose the disease. I'm trying to articulate the disease in as much as I can in what I see. Like, that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, but the disease is simply, well, I think the largest part of it is a principality, and it's a principality of evil. And it's been around since the beginning.
I agree.
And that's the hugest thing. It's like we need to address the principality of evil, because I am very much I'm very much inclined to believe that everything that we see in the visible physical realm is bullshit. It's all in the spiritual realm. That's where all the fighting happens, and that's where we exist. And so this principality of evil exists in a spiritual realm. We can't see it, but when it manifests, we can sure as hell point it out. Like we know it when we see it, but we can't articulate what is this principality of evil. We can't articulate it until somebody manifests it, and then we're like, that's what it is right there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's why we have such a hard time with this language, right? Because there are other principalities or lesser spirits. I'll say spirits.
Okay.
Principalities, birth spirits, people embody spirits. So there are those spirits that we can see, but we don't really see them until somebody manifests. And then they're like, that's bad. Right? Like then we make the discernment of that's bad. Yes, Chad. No,
Bad
you're the
for that?
confused. Remember, I'm the bad, he's the good, you're the confused. But so
Chad still has that Protestant original sin. Bad.
so we're dealing with a very large principality that is very old and has birthed many, many, many spirits. And
Yes.
so what we're seeing is every time somebody embodies one of those multiple spirits, that's just a symptom of the principality. But they're so disconnected from the principality that we can't see it for what it is. And so that's where the whole thing starts to fall apart, right? Rather than trying to identify the principality, we need to say, God alone, you know what that principality is. Help us fight it.
Well, there's that. I mean, I want to hear what Chad has to say. I mean, there's a level where I agree with you. Like all we can do, the most practical things we can do. This is something my wife says to me all the time as I'm going off and spouting about, like I'll start talking to her about the Trinity and philosophy and stuff. And she'll like, it's not her vibe at all. And she'll listen to me as long as she can. And she'll be like, okay, let's get practical. And then she just starts like talking about the stuff we have to accomplish during the day. But I think there's merit to that. So to be as practical as we can, like, I mean, it's somewhat, these things are simple, right? And to really make it concrete, like for me and you, what we can do is like, not bicker about things. So like simply on the Discord, like going back and forth and getting frustrated and fighting about things, because like, you know, I maybe said like,
Publicly.
Yeah,
I wouldn't do it publicly. You can do it amongst yourselves. But I wouldn't do it publicly.
Well, and part of it is like I wanted this to be public. All parts of it had been public, and part of it was like the POS theology, and then I said like Protestants eat dead words and stuff, and we could have a whole separate conversation about what I meant by that and like flesh it out. But like part of it is then like, but there's different things of like, you called me smug multiple times, which hurt my feelings. Like I didn't think that was nice. You know, like I don't know that I ever said anything about your character ever.
No.
Yeah. And so like that was hurtful to me because I was just like, I'm just trying to talk about ideas. Like I'm not assaulting the guy's character. And I don't even know how much you hold these ideas. And so like that's part of it is like, I think at the end of the day, again, like we can, no matter what we talk about in the abstract, like, because somewhat when we're talking in the abstract, it's just like we're actively, even though we're talking live, just like doing theology books here. But like the personal is where the money is, you know? So like we need to be loving to each other, you know? We need to speak, you know, in so much as it depends on you, be thought well of by outsiders. So like even on Bridges of Meaning, like Bridges of Meaning is an estuary. And so there's all sorts of people in there. There's self-identifying Christians, there's self-identifying atheists, there's self-identifying Jews. There's, I don't know, do we have any Muslims? And there's all sorts of people. We have like a Buddhist, I know. We have all these different people, and we need to, like, it makes me think of Paul when he's just like chewing out the Corinthians for like taking things to court. And he's just like, are you kidding me? You can't even like figure out these issues you're taking each other to court. What the hell are you doing? What's going on? So at the end of the day, like, so part of that is we need to be loving to each other, but also I do think there's merit in trying to name this stuff. Like, the propositional for me, and I've said this before, is, and the abstract thinking stuff is for the future. So like there is merit to it. That's why God gave us a mind and an imagination and the ability to abstract and think about theological propositional things, because it's in a very, like Jordan Peterson says, you play out potentialities in the future so that your mind self, your projections can die, and so you don't have to. That's what thinking is for, in my opinion, is to project yourself into the future. But like it's not the real. So like both of those things are true. That's valuable, but also the now is valuable. Actually loving each other is valuable. If you're an asshole to each other and you use like this future abstraction as like a justification for being an asshole, like all of it's bullshit. You know? I don't know. That was a lot. I don't even know if that makes sense to me.
Well,
Okay, so attacking your character wasn't right on my part, and I apologize for that. But I also do think you need to be able to call out. I do think you need to be able to call out the bullshit when you see it. And so personally, what I would have done if I was having those thoughts and feelings, because I said a whole lot of things that you're never going to get to hear about Calvinism. And when did I do it? In a well, technically it was a public setting, but I was there with Jeff, Jacob, and Sam. And I aired those grievances to them. I aired them pretty loudly, and I'm sure I said things that are far worse than what you said about Calvinism. And so I feel like, yes, have that conversation and have it with Sherry and have it with Cal, and who else was with you? Michael? For the POS Theology video. I don't remember because he wasn't there for that long, and then he was gone.
Nate, maybe. Probably Nate.
Have that. But maybe have that as a Zoom meeting that you don't record and put out on the internet. Because if you're going to like espouse these things, like process it externally, use them as a soundboard. And then when you have it down, be like, aha, now I got it. This is what I really want to say.
But what theological conversations can be recorded and put out there publicly to maybe benefit other people, even though we don't have it all? Because here's the thing. This is where I'll push back. If you imagine there's some point out there where you're going to have all this theology nailed down, that now it's presentable, where you have it all curated and you've got it perfect, and now you can present it to the world, that doesn't exist, Charlie.
It's not having all of it together all at once. It's just like, if you would have had a soundboard, maybe they would have said, oh, you don't want to say Protestant. You want to say this, right? Like somebody to bounce that off of so that you don't stick your foot in your mouth. Because I didn't take that as an attack against me. Yeah. I took it as you attacking all those people out there that don't manifest the things that you're talking about that just got labeled as that. And I'm like, if you had especially if you had a problem with me, record it on video. Tell me about it. I will watch it. Mm-hmm. I will listen to that critique. But when it's like this broad thing, I'm like, man, you just hurt a lot of people. with those words, like, because they do cut deep, whether you want to think about it or not. I don't have the guts to show that video to any of my friends, period, because I know how hurt they would be by it. So I'm like, and then they're asking me, what's this argument about? And I'm like, I can't tell you without showing you the video, and if I do, you're not going to like it, because it's going to make you feel bad, and I don't want that for them. So I'm like, that's why I'm like, damn it. Has your wife ever told you you're not wrong, but saying it is wrong? Have you ever heard that?
I've had, well, I don't know that my wife has said that exact thing, but I've had Sherry, like, I've had conversations, actually, in talking about the divine feminine, I've had conversations with Sherry and Sarah. I don't know if you know Sarah. She's not super active on here.
Yeah, I know her.
Sarah Hardy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they've talked about that before. There's something about, and I think that's true. I mean, it's not my strength by any means, but there's something about the divine feminine that there's a lot of power and wisdom sometimes in the implicit. Something my wife has told me, though, is like, just because you think it doesn't mean you have to say it.
Yeah. Well, and that kind of borders on that same thing, right? Like, you might be right, but just saying it is wrong. And I'm like that too. I'll be the first to tell you, I've said things about my wife's sister because of how she is, and she just gives me this look and rolls her eyes, and I know I'm right, but saying it was wrong. And that's how I felt about that situation. It's like, you're not wrong, Luke. You're not wrong that you see these things. But when you say it, then it's wrong. It's like, how can I manifest that in truth and love without hurting others?
So part of it is probably what I'm taking from this is just which is, I mean, the evergreen advice in my life is to just be more thoughtful in my speech, which I think, I mean, you should have, believe it or not, I mean, you should have known me like 10 years ago. But so that's evergreen advice for me, and it's good. Part of what I'm thinking, though, in the continuing discernment is, because like I said, like we're never going to get to a place where it's this perfect curated presentation to be able to do, because then the problem is like it kind of gets at my whole impulse of wanting to speak in front of my mind, is because, like, I don't want to, part of that is my own fear of self-deception, is that I'm almost careful of speaking so quickly, or like I almost want to speak so quickly that that my own filter isn't blocking it, because I don't trust there's something about my own process of wanting to curate. It's kind of that whole Instagram impulse, right? We curate and we want to present an image of ourselves, right? And I don't want to do that. Like, I hate that. Everything in me is the opposite of that. And the negative side of that is, like, you're getting pretty unfiltered me. So there's a lot of, there's a lot of chaff with the wheat, let's say, whatever. You're just getting all facets of it. Like, I'm not, and part of that is like, I don't know what the nature of this is. Part of it is just personality and temperament, but also part of it is just personal, like, there's going to be, this has been a constant thing in my life, is that I've met a lot of people, and depending on their personality, there's been people who were like, when I used to work for money more so, and I had this 9-to-5 kind of job, and a couple of guys there that I became really good friends with, both of them like told me later on in life, and that, like, they didn't really like me right away, because I'm just I'm a very like big 5 temperament. I'm 98th percentile enthusiasm, 98th percentile openness. Like I'm just first percentile politeness. So like it's just a whirlwind of a lot of things. And but I became really good friends with these guys. Both these guys actually ended up coming to my church because like I used to be a hardcore like street evangelist kind of evangelical type. And I became really good friends with these guys. I'm still friends with them to this day. And that's kind of just the way that it is. And so part of it is like, I don't know, there are just degrees of knowing a person. And like on the opposite end of a spectrum, you could have someone who makes YouTube videos or who says things that are like non-offensive completely, but that's not necessarily an accurate representation of them and what they think either. It's just part of it is just being a person, so like I don't know how to.
Right, but then in that same video, if we're going to go that route, then in that same video, then you didn't say anything that you actually don't mean, that you actually don't believe. And I'm like, so is it this way or is it this way? Right? Like, did you say all those words and like you meant them in a different way than what were perceived, or you just meant every bit of it? Like you didn't say a single thing there that you did not mean to say.
Well, right, but that's what's hard about language, right, Charlie, is that I think to some degree we all say things we mean all the time, and but none of it, because all words and everything that we say is an icon, is like to some degree we all say what we mean and we don't, right? So like I've heard somebody said once, like nothing came out of the mouth of a drunk that wasn't there already. So like just because somebody was a drunk and they say something, like that was there, it's just like the alcohol created the situation where it came out. Or so to your point, what I said in that video, like if you take my person into account, and if you know me, and if you take what I said as iconic, and is the seed, maybe I'll put it this way, is the seed of what I meant and in what I said what I believe and true to that video? Absolutely. But like if you want to sit there as like an analyst and just take every one of my words and like write them down and break them down and dissect them and then take them in isolation from everything else and extract my person from it and my intent and my context and my heart and my, like if you want to take all the icon out of it and just make it into a static idol that then you can use to like be like, well, you said this, and then use it as a tool to like put it in my face, well, that won't work. Because then that's like, that's taking my words and what I meant, and it's extracting my person from it and using it against me, which then isn't what I meant. You know what I mean?
And
So
how
then
much
let
of
me
that is
ask you
projection?
bluntly. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Chad.
And I was just wondering how much of that would actually be projection, because like what I'm wondering is, well, first of all, after I agreed to do this with you guys, my wife had mentioned that one of our close friends invited us over to do a bonfire. So I got a little bit longer. I can only go a little longer, unfortunately.
I can go too soon. No, that's all right.
But what? So I guess my question. Well, first, God, one of the things you could do, Charlie, and I think maybe one of the things we can all do when we run into these issues is there's something called the fourth step. If you ever get a chance to look into that, because it's there's part of it, Charlie, I think too is, and for any of us, whatever, if somebody said it, the people that would be hurt by whatever Luke said or they think Luke said, they have tools to deal with that, you know, like it's, you know, and so my biggest concern is if I was a Discord member, if I came into the Discord and the first week I was there and I noticed what was going on in those pages, I would have been like, what the hell is this? Like, and I would have been out. I would have just been out. It would have been, because I wouldn't know who the hell this guy, Luke, or even you are. And I just think, is this what this place is about? Where we're gonna get up like this petty thing? Like, I came into Discord to get away from that kind of stuff. Now, to a degree, arguing to a degree is good, I think, and there's a bit of that that's healthy and necessary. But at some point, at some point in the future, when this happens, whoever's listening to this, at some point in the future, if you run into this type of thing, it should come off of the public, and it should just be between the two guys. If if it's that important to you, because I do think that part of this is people who do come into like a Discord, what they see in real time happening between people, their lives may depend on it. I don't know. Maybe not. I don't know. And so do I want to contribute to why somebody didn't stick around? I don't want to do that. I'm sure, like, there's one time I was in one of these chat rooms and one of these guys, he upset me and I fucking snapped on him, dude. You know, because it was like he pushed a button on me, and I felt bad about that. I had to go back and I apologize to the guy because I was like, what a dick I am, you know. But at some point, some of this stuff, my biggest concern about the whole thing is estuary can be a dirty place, but some of this stuff can be handled off in private between two people, and I think that's good. The other thing is like, I think you guys both have a lot to offer and can be very useful to these places. And I don't know, man. That's why I don't know. I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. I don't even know why I'm here. I don't even know what my name is.
You telling us to just quit arguing about it? Just get over it? Okay, then let me just ask you flat out, Luke.
Okay.
What did you mean when you said that?
Oh, geez. I don't like that.
Let's clear the air, because I said what the Protestant work ethic actually is. What did you mean when you said that?
Specifically about the Protestant work ethic?
Yes, get very specific about that.
Well, that's probably the least developed part of the whole thing in my thinking.
So then you don't know what you meant by it.
No, well, like I've told you, I don't know what I mean about this whole thing. Like, I'm trying to think about it. Essentially, what I'm trying to talk about is something that's been like percolating in my consciousness for 20 years.
Is this what you're trying to say, Luke? That we who are claiming to be Christians make God smaller than what he is?
I mean, for sure. Yeah. I mean, for sure, that's part of it. I think that
as a newbie, that's what I noticed that we do. As a newbie to the game, to Christianity. God, I even hate saying that because this feels weird. I mean, like, just it doesn't feel authentic. It doesn't. But
well, just take the tie off; it'll feel more authentic.
Oh,
yeah. Well, I'm definitely like. What I mean is, it's back to this theological thing. It's like, I think, like, it's so much bigger. God is so much bigger, and Christ is so much bigger than you could ever begin to put into words, ever. And I think, like, when we get into, like, for me, when I read like the Sermon on the Mount, and I read some of this other stuff, and I read all the different conflicting pieces of scripture and what the scribes wrote down and all this stuff, I think that's the exact point. It's so much more that you can't. It was never meant to be understood, because it's kind of like it meets me where I am right now. Like when I was talking with these guys this morning and thinking about this, and that thing came up about let your yes be yeses and your no's be no's. And then another thing that came to mind was like when Judas gets mad because the lady's wasting the oil on washing Jesus's feet when they could be using it for something else. For some reason that came to mind. That was like an in the now real. I can't articulate what it is, but it made sense to me. And so sometimes I think like we're sitting here trying to figure all this out, and then like we're gonna put this guy over here. You better be nice and don't say the wrong thing, and then this guy over there, and do. It's like God is so much bigger than that. What are we doing? Like there's people out there suffering that don't give a shit about any of this stuff that we're talking about. They want to see us acting like, because if I was new and I tripped over I might have been even attracted to the POS Theology video, and I might not have understood a goddamn word about it, but I might have understood something in that whole conversation that might have saved my life. I don't know. Like, but I don't know. Who are we to say? Like, God is so much bigger. So this is my big thing. Like, it's so much more simple and so much more complicated than you can even wrap your mind around, that it meets you where you are if you want to be met there with it. And if you want to be met there with the bad or the evil, then you will be met there with it. If you want to be met there with the answers and the peace and the letting go and the turning the other cheek, then you'll be met there with it. I mean, It's like I was talking to somebody about this getting the vaccination shot, and they think that it's evil and this and that. And I did too. But then I thought, well, me holding on to this fact that the vaccination is evil, that to me is almost like an idol. And so I think I want to let that go, and I'm gonna go get that shot. So that to me, it's like, am I wrong? Who knows? Who gives a shit? Like that's between me and God. So it's like, who cares? Like, we're bigger than this. We're grown men who are called to be useful. Like, we could stop being stupid little brats, because we're good at it. And I'm sorry if I was offensive with that. And I said the GD phrase. I also apologize for that. Don't take me seriously. I'm wearing a mask and I'm a drunk. I mean, seriously.
Chad, that gets down to the whole point of why I even started the argument. It's like usefulness. Okay, great, good. So then why are we going to pick a theological fight? It's like,
because that's what we do.
I didn't want him to pick the theological fight though, but that's what happened. It's like, I just want people to get somewhere that they enjoy being. They're in the community that they enjoy being in, and then they go out and they be useful. Like, that's it. I don't care where that is.
Right. But now if you look at it from my perspective, the only person I saw making that fire bigger than what it needed to be was
me.
Me. Right. So like, that's why at some point you could take that fire, be private in that, because that might be useful, not to hide it, but so you can resolve it, so we can get back to the business of doing what the hell we do. And
because I should go too, but the last thing that I would say is, like, I really was never intending to start a theological fight. Like, really, I don't know, that's probably been the most troubling and like hurtful thing to me, because really ultimately to me everything is personal. It is. And like I actually have really deep theological and philosophical convictions about that. I think everything is personal for everyone, actually. And so at the end of the day, like when you were so insistent that, like, Luke, you're trying to start a fight and you're being tribal, like that really bothers me. It really bothers me that people think that I'm trying to start theological fights and be tribal, because from my perspective, like, nothing could be further from the truth. And so to me, then it's like, as someone whose deepest desire, one of my deepest desires in life, is to be known and loved, which a lot of people's is, but I want people to see me accurately. I'm just like, that is That is like the opposite way that I see myself. Complete opposite. Like I have zero interest in tribalism. Like, I mean, I'm just like one of my best friends on the Discord is a Unitarian. You know, like,
Well, that's
or
because Sam's good at that. He's good
Well,
at being
Sam's-
everybody's friend.
right. Sam is great at that. But like even Jacob, let's pick somebody abrasive. Jacob. I think Jacob's great. He's a Jew.
I love Jacob.
I know. So like I don't care about the theological stuff. It's just like I'm talking about it because I have thoughts about it. And like I said, it's the tool to project into the future. And I think that's what thinking is. I think that's what propositions and thinking are for. So we have to do it, but I'm not trying to pick tribal fights about it. That's like the opposite of what I'm trying to do.
But it made it seem that way because I watched the whole thing and I've read The Moral Landscape by Sam Harris. And here's what you had. You had West, propositional thinking, Western theology, bad. Here's what we do over here on this other side. And this is good. And these people agree with me. And so this is good, right? And I watched the whole video and I'm like, but that's tribal.
But I'm talking about propositions. Number one, I'm not a dualist, and I'm talking about propositions. So when you say over here in the West, what they do is bad, and over here in the East, what we do is good, no. Because the proper being is existent everywhere. I'm talking about ideas in and of themselves. I'm not talking about being. I'm talking about ideas.
Oh, if you're just saying like there's shitty Western theology, then yeah, some of it is 100%.
We solved it. Holy shit, man.
But it doesn't get to the point that it's not, you can't lay it at the feet. You can't go, okay, Luther is the father of the Protestant Reformation. Okay, well, that's just bullshit and right off the top. Just because Luther may have started something doesn't mean that he is the be all end all for the Reformation. Okay, there's multiple things that led to the Reformation. So to start with Luther and say, here's something he said, therefore Protestant theology bad because they're just all downstream from Luther, or to say Augustinian original sin and everything Protestant is downstream of that, you have to take into account all the historicity of how we've tried to push that out.
Yeah, 100%. And that's actually a conversation I want to have down the road. Nate is super busy right now, but Nate, like the human encyclopedia, is one of the people that I've wanted to talk to about this, to have like because now I think a better way to describe it than POS is like what I've been calling the divided man syndrome, because that's really how I see it. It's like what leads to this divided man, both internally and externally. So like divisions in ourselves and also divisions in relationship, because that's really at the heart of what I'm wanting to get at. And I actually would love to talk with Nate because he's so much better at facts and history to just walk through how I think this thing evolved. And that's something that I'm just to try to articulate this better. And that's like a conversation that we've had that's been in the queue for like a month or two, and we just haven't got around to having because life's busy, you know?
Yeah, you mentioned the relationships. That's a huge deal. I think this is at the core of all of it, you know, and yeah, I think that's at the core of the whole thing. If if I learn how to treat people poorly because I'm treated poorly, I'm going to treat people poorly, and then we do all this thing. You got all this stacked up. I think I like that divided man thing. But well, guys, I don't mean to be rude. I don't really want to go, but I do want to go.
How dare you?
I know.
How dare you? But yeah, I think we did get it solved. Here's a way to frame it. There's some shit theology in the West, and it's caused people to deconstruct. Where is it? How can we find out how to possibly avoid the pitfalls of it so that we don't have to keep going down this route?
Here's something else to think about. The word theology. What is it? I'm not trying, we said it a bunch of times. We're not trying to have a fight about theology. Like, that's ridiculous. The word theology and fight maybe don't even belong together. if we're trying to know the nature of God and we're doing it with fighting, it's silly.
Yeah. Yeah. Like true
So-
fighting. I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
All
So
right.
I'm an idiot. Anyways,
Peace and love. One love.
See you later, guys.
I quit.
You quit? All right. Bye. See you, Luke.
All right. See you later.
See you.